This week, Eartha Kitt. I'm going to talk about her larger roles, but let me just say, this woman never took a break. Whether it was cameos, small parts, performances, she was in stuff from like small tours of shows to huge franchises. She clearly loved singing, dancing, acting, putting on a show. There's also absolutely no way that I have 100% of all of the details. I don't have all of the specific days, probably don't have all the details or all of the relationships that she had. She was a pretty private person, but also the farther you go back in history, the harder it is to find stuff, especially if you're not buying and reading an entire book in 1 week, which I am just not capable of. I did the absolute best that I could based on all of the sources that I could find on the internet and interviews, but if you have anything extra to add or any corrections, please drop them in the comments. I would love to hear more. Okay, so her birth chart, she is a Capricorn Sun, a Cancer Moon, a Sagittarius Rising, a Capricorn Mercury, an Aquarius Venus, and a Taurus Mars. I feel like she actually has a pretty balanced chart considering some of the charts we see for famous people. And getting into her childhood, I think I have the timeline pretty accurate based on interviews from before and after she had more information on her childhood. So let's get into that. So Eartha was born January 17th of 1927, and she was born on a cotton plantation in St. Matthews, South Carolina, which is near the town of North. But growing up, she actually didn't know her correct birthday. She always thought her birthday was January 26th, 1926, until way later in her life. And she believes that she got the name Eartha because the harvest was good that year, and her father chose it. Her mother was Black and Cherokee, and her father was white. But growing up, she did not know her father. She didn't even know his name. She just knew that he abandoned them. And her father was the son of a plantation owner. Specifically, this plantation was under the family name Keith, which is where she gets her last name Kitt, she believes. And the plantation was a cotton plantation. They were also slave owners, and her grandfather was an officer in the Confederate Army. One of her biographers said that her father was a doctor. That could also be true, but I know that Eartha said specifically that they were owners of a plantation as well. Eartha believes, and this is probably accurate, that it was a forced impregnation and that her mother gave birth to her at around 14 years old. And after that, her mother ran away because of the gossip going on in the town, and also possibly because church leaders were telling her to do so. At that point, Eartha was given to another woman who I'm guessing was not much older than her actual mother, and who Eartha believed to be her mother for much of her childhood and also struggled to take care of her. So Eartha has said that her first memory is of walking through the woods, sleeping in the woods, or sleeping in barns, trying to find a place that would take them in for the night or for longer with the woman that she believed was her mother for a lot of her childhood and her half-sister Pearl. And she said that she talked very, very little when she was a child because she already felt that she was a burden on them because a lot of families would not let them in and give them a place to stay because Eartha was mixed. In the early 1930s, Eartha's mother got married, and this was another white man who apparently already had multiple children and was willing to take Pearl, but refused to take Eartha. Her mother felt it was best if her and Pearl were not separated, so they were sent to live with another family nearby, and this was around when Eartha was 4, I believe. This was not the only family she was given to, though. She said that she was given away to multiple families over her childhood, and all of them treated her extremely badly. You can fill in the blanks there. I cannot say the details here. They are horrific, but she has talked about them in interviews if you want to go look that up. With all of these different families, though, she did work on the Keith cotton plantation. Many of them did, and as we know, she believes that the Keith cotton plantation is actually her father's family's plantation. And she said she wasn't sure how many of them knew of her relation to them, but she's pretty sure that one boy did know because when he would come to collect bales of cotton at the end of the day, he would always throw her food. And just that phrase, throw her food, should give y'all a little bit of a better picture of how she was being treated. And she said that she was mistreated, that's the term we're going to use for the app, by the older children in all of the ways. Again, y'all can fill in the blanks there because I can't say it here. She also found as a child that she was not welcome in either the white or Black communities because she was mixed, and they all called her horrible names and treated her horribly. Eartha's daughter did say later in life when she was asked what her race was, she would always say human race, because she did not like the societal need to categorize and put everybody into little boxes. And I'm sure part of that comes from the exclusion that she felt as a child. She did sing in the church choir, though, and people loved her voice, of course. I mean, she's Eartha Kitt, so I feel like that goes without saying. In 1934, when she was 7, her mother passed away, or the woman that she thought of as her mother throughout her childhood. This was 6 months after she had given birth to Almita, Eartha's other half-sister. And Eartha firmly believes that her mother was poisoned by the stepchildren, the children of the man that she had married. And I will tell that story in the next part. Also, if you're wondering why I'm not switching pictures like I usually do, obviously this was a very long time ago, so there wasn't quite as many pictures anyways, but I'm pretty sure that this is the first picture that we have of her because obviously if she was being severely mistreated, nobody was taking pictures of her. So this is the story of Eartha's mother being poisoned. Eartha said that she had overheard that one of the stepchildren had made some food and poisoned it and convinced her mother to eat it because they wanted to get rid of her and they thought that she might have cheated. And apparently right after they poisoned her, she actually felt the need to puke, but her husband walked in, so she held it in, which I'm guessing is because at that time women were not expected to have normal bodily functions, but that actually ended up making her more ill. And Eartha said that the husband at that point was actually told by the daughters that they had poisoned her, and so he did not get a doctor because he didn't want his children to get in trouble. And supposedly while she was very ill, she did have some moments of clarity where she tried to explain what had happened to her, but nobody around her who heard her had any way to help her or wasn't willing to help her. After she died, they burned the mattress, and some neighbors found some voodoo symbols as well as some letters in the fire that revealed what had actually happened. And during the burial, Eartha said that they also passed Almita multiple times over the grave, which is part of a voodoo belief that if you take the life of a mother early, then she will come and take the baby as well. And so they were severing ties between this world and the next, which once again proved that all of this had happened. In 1935, though, Eartha moved to Harlem. She was only 8 at the time. Apparently, a letter was sent from the church in her hometown of North to this aunt in Harlem, basically saying that if she was to stay in the current home that she was in much longer, she would not be around. And the family she was living with at the time actually bathed her for the first time ever in preparation for her going to Harlem. Also, she was sent clothing, so this was the first time that she had good clothing. And they also gave her food. This was the first time that she was given good food and also the first time that she had white bread. So obviously they were trying to make it seem like they hadn't been treating her poorly, but it was evident anyways because of the scarring. And in Harlem, she was living with an aunt, and this is why I've been putting in quotation marks. Her name was Mamie Lou Riley, and Eartha said that when she saw her, she looked so much more like Eartha than the woman that she had thought was her mother growing up, and she believes that this actually was her real mother. And obviously Harlem was also a huge culture shock. This was the first time she'd been in a city, but it was also the first time that she had had real clothing, that she had seen a bathroom, that she had seen buses, trains, elevators, all of that stuff. They were very poor though, and they were on government aid. And she said they ate so many apples, because apples are a cheap food, that for years after she couldn't eat them. Growing up in Harlem, she did have dance lessons and also piano lessons, although she said she did not like piano lessons, which, come on, who did? Who here took piano lessons as a kid and liked it? I want to know. I hated them. She sang and did plays at church, and her teachers also said that she had a great talent for reading aloud. Elementary school, gotta love it. I think we should bring back popcorn reading, personally. I miss reading aloud. They also lived in a part of Harlem that had a large Puerto Rican population, and so she would go to local Caribbean dances. Caribbean or Caribbean? Somebody let me know. And that is one of the places that she learned to dance too. Eartha very obviously had a tough childhood. I think tough is probably the lightest word that I could use to describe it, but she said she was conditioned from the time when she was a child that she didn't belong, so she sort of followed her own path. And I think that that absolutely went with her throughout life and is probably part of how she became famous, because she was just so herself. In 1940, Eartha auditioned and got into the High School for the Performing Arts. And she also said around this time they had a bit more money, they were living a little bit more comfortably, and she also got a part-time job. But in 1941, Eartha's aunt/mother, Mamie, kicked her out of the house. And I'm not sure on the exact timeline on this, but after she kicked her out, Eartha did end up dropping out of high school. At that point, supposedly, she got a seamstress job in a factory, but she didn't keep that too long, and she actually tried to go back to school and live with Mamie again, but it did not work out, and she ended up kicking her out again. By the spring of 1943, Eartha was working in a factory and also trying to make it as an actress. And in September of 1944, Eartha met a dancer who was working with the Katherine Dunham group, and she said that they were having auditions. Eartha was 17 at the time, and she said that the girl was actually looking for directions to buy makeup at a store, and that confused Eartha because No one our age wore makeup back then. Wow. Times have changed. She had heard of the Katherine Dunham group though, so she struck up a deal with the girl that she would give her directions in exchange for borrowing a leotard to go to the audition. And at the audition, even though Katherine Dunham said that Eartha's boobs were too big to ever be a professional dancer, she did let her into the program. And the Katherine Dunham group was actually like a dance school for all black dancers. They did both singing and dancing, and they were super popular. They toured all over the US, Central America, South America, Europe, and they also did Broadway shows. They were sometimes in movies. It was a huge deal, and this is one of her portraits for the dance group. She actually has her leg up. I had to crop it out for TikTok, but beautiful photo. She's obviously gorgeous. And in 1948, she was in this movie Casbah, and she got no credit for it. I think it was with the dance troupe, but just to note, that's one of her first performances we see on camera. So sometime around 1948, 1949, Eartha was touring with the Katherine Dunham group, and she met Porfirio Rubirosa. That is my absolute best attempt at pronunciation. I am so sorry if I butchered it. And here he is, obviously a very good looking man. Supposedly he sent a note backstage saying that he wanted to take her to dinner, but when they called to confirm it, she said she couldn't go because she didn't have anything to wear. So she got to go on an all expenses paid shopping spree on his dime. What a dream. And on that first date, he actually gave her a pearl necklace. Not a euphemism, not a euphemism, a real pearl necklace. Only catch was, he was actually married to Doris Duke at the time, who was an heiress. They did still have a brief affair though. He was known to be a playboy. This was really not a surprising move by him to anyone. But here he is with Eartha later on when he was dating Zsa Gabor. Zsa was kind of third wheeling in this picture, but anyways, cute. At some point when the Katherine Dunham group was touring in Europe though, around 1949-1950, Eartha actually ended up deciding to stay in Paris once they had done that part of the trip. They had performed at a club there called Carol's. It was famous and it had an openly gay female owner named Fred, which feels extremely progressive for the 1940s. Anyways, Fred really liked her and wanted her to perform regularly, and she loved Paris because it's Paris. So Katherine Dunham group moved on and she stayed in Paris and started performing there regularly and also at their second club. And she did perform at nightclubs all throughout her life. I think she really loved the clubs, and here she is performing. In 1950, Time Runs begins showing. This was part of Orson Welles' musical that he created called An Evening with Orson Welles. It was basically different storylines based on classic literature, and Duke Ellington did the music for it. And if you don't know who Orson Welles is, no worries. He is a famous film man. I say that because he did a little bit of everything, but he created Citizen Kane, which he wrote, filmed, directed, produced, and also did the lead role in. And film critics are obsessed with it, and it's always on the best movies of all times list. Anyways, Eartha played Helen of Troy in Time Runs, and Orson titled Eartha the most exciting woman in the world, which she never lost that title. That stuck with her. At one point, he actually got jealous of all the attention that she would get on stage and started trying to, like, overshadow her, which, okay, that's just not gonna work, Orson. Look at her, okay? Yeah. She's Eartha Kitt, you are there. He actually looks like Vince Vaughn in this picture. People did think that they were together though for a long time, although she said that they never really were romantically together. Another time she said that he bit her lip during a kiss scene, and when I say bit her lip, I don't mean like, bit her lip, oh, sexy. No, chomp, blood, bit her lip. And then when she went backstage and was pissed at him, because why wouldn't you be, he said he got excited, which is just giving you the creepiest, ickiest vibes ever. I'm so sorry, Orson, but that is weird. There were at the very least rumors that they were together, but she said that they never slept together. And her quote on it was, "He ate, I watched, he talked, I listened." I could never be that patient. Unfortunately on this one, I am an Orson and not an Eartha, even though I just literally said that he was creepy and icky. On this one only, unfortunately, I am an Orson, because I'm the eater and I'm the talker. She also said, though, that he would, after rehearsing all night, walk me up the Champs-Elysees to my hotel with the sun coming up. We would look at the sights, window shop, and he would recite Shakespeare to me. less creepy, more cute. Basically, this man was pampering the hell out of her. Seems to be a very passionate man, I guess we can say that. And she was living it up, which I don't blame her. In 1951, after Time Runs finished showing, Eartha lived in Istanbul for a while. She was performing regularly at a club there, and she also learned Turkish. One thing about Eartha is that, as Lady Gaga says, she lives for the applause. She said, "I have a great need for affection from an audience," and that maybe it might stem from her childhood, which I think is probably a fair assessment. In December of 1951, she moved back to New York and started playing at multiple different clubs. The first one she played at wasn't actually very successful at the time. I think she said that it was because she was singing in so many different languages, the audience just wasn't sure what to make of her. But after that, she had tons of success at lots of different clubs over that period of time. At this point, she also decided to put into her contract that she would only perform for integrated audiences. And while she was performing at one of these clubs, a producer scouted her for a revue show. And I've come to learn through this series that a revue show is kind of like a cabaret, but it doesn't have to have a theme. There's like comedy skits and singing and dancing. It's kind of like a variety show. And this one specifically started on May 16th of 1952. It was Leonard Sillman's New Faces of 1952. And Eartha's character was basically like sexy, sultry, dripping in diamonds, everything you've ever wanted to be, or at least if you're me, everything you've ever wanted to be. Y'all get the picture here. And apparently during C'est si bon, which is one of her famous French songs that she covers, she would wear a leopard one piece and a little black skirt, and then at the end of the number she would like whip off the black skirt to reveal just the leopard one piece. Hot. Also reminds me of that one scene in Burlesque. I hope y'all know the scene that I'm talking about. Please don't embarrass me. Somebody say that you know it. A composer for the show, though, said that she sang "I Want to Be Evil," and she was, and apparently also said that he could think of nothing kind to say of her. And she did kind of start getting a reputation in the US for being rude, but she did not have that reputation at all in Europe. So, me thinks that the US has something to do with it. She also met Sammy Davis Jr. at New Faces and originally actually thought that he was like the gopher for the set and asked him to go get her coffee, which he played along with. I would too. They ended up dating though, and she said that he was always shocked that people would know exactly who she was but wouldn't always recognize him, even though he had been in the industry a lot longer than her. But basically they had a very playful relationship, and that will come back later. But moving on to another man, in the early 1950s, Eartha also met James Dean. And I don't know exactly when, so that's what I'm saying. Early 1950s, somewhere in that time period. She said that they had a soul connection and just instantly understood each other. They were both from small towns, and she said they both very much felt lost in the industry. And a lot of people believed that they were in love, but her daughter has said that nothing romantic ever happened between them. Although, that being said, she did talk about an experience where she had a threesome with him and Paul Newman and said it was one of the most celestial experiences of her life, and she never knew that lovemaking could be so beautiful. Alright, we'll just move on from that statement. And RCA Victor Presents Eartha Kitt came out in December of 1953. And two of her biggest hits, I Want to Be Evil and C'est si bon, are both on this album. And by the way, she said on the I Want to Be Evil that evil is not trying to indicate an adult evil. It's a little girl mischief, like going out and throwing stones at windows. I don't love the little girl reference. I feel like maybe like youthful or playful or carefree, pretty much anything other than little girl would have been a better reference there, but we get her picture. So Christmas of 1953, Santa Baby is released.
Christmas tree with some decorations bought at Tiffany. I really do believe in you. Let's see if you believe in me. Santa honey, forgot to mention one little thing. Our ring. I don't mean on the phone, Santa honey, and hurry down the chimney tonight.
As you can imagine, this was exactly the type of song that fit Eartha's persona, which was coming to be called Sex Kitten. She did apparently start laughing at the end of her songs, though, just to make the women more comfortable and kind of make them realize this is an act. I'm not coming for your husbands. And then February 19th of 1954, New Faces is released on film. Obviously, this is Eartha. And this was the first time that she was credited in a film. On June 17th of 1954, Sammy Davis Jr. comes and surprises Eartha at the club she's performing at. And she said he had a ring box with him and he pulled her aside and she said no. Not like that, she was gentle, but that's your big reveal. He apparently told her to just wear it for the night, see how it feels kind of deal, and that nobody has to know. But she was about to go on stage, so obviously everybody would know. That wasn't really plausible. His mistake, though, was that after he left, he called the tabloids and told them that he had proposed to Eartha, and that pretty much ended their relationship. But they were still friends. In 1954, Eartha began dating Arthur Lowe Jr. He was an heir to a chain of cinemas. They were super in love, and she said that she would have married him, but his mother got in the way because she did not like Eartha because racism. Your loss, Arthur. Eartha also said that his mother had her kidnapped in order for him to think that she was a bad girl. Because being kidnapped makes you a bad person, obviously. No, that's sarcasm, by the way. But I feel like I'm either missing something or just the dots do not connect in this woman's head, or I guess in Arthur's if he believed her. I mean, she's already not seeming great, obviously. So I don't know. I can't tell if I'm missing something or if she's just sucks, you know? Either way, I feel like it goes without saying that you should not kidnap people. Also goes without saying that was the end of her relationship with him. In the 1950s, Eartha also started trying to find her birth father and her birth certificate, but she had no luck on it. She could not find anything, and she did give up for a very long time. In 1954, Mrs. Patterson began showing, and they ran this show through the next year. She played Theodora Hicks, who was a young girl and the main character, and it's set in the 20s in the South, which is exactly the time period and place where she grew up. Another actress who was in the show, Elizabeth Welch, claimed that Eartha got an actress who was about 80 years old fired because she was so old that she had bad eyesight and couldn't remember her lines. So once again, there was some rumors that Eartha was rude. Also in 1954, That Bad Eartha was released, the album, and she did an interview with Q magazine and talked about her family. She said that sometimes now that she's famous, occasionally somebody will come backstage and announce themselves as relatives of mine. They get the brush off treatment. I'll never forget how my own people treated me and my mother. And she also reiterated how excluded she felt from both the white and black communities growing up because she was mixed. They also did touch on the rumors that she was rude that were going around, and she said, "I'm not cold, just a little numb sometimes, courtesy of my childhood." In 1955, Down to Eartha, the album, was released. And September 30th of 1955, James Dean passed away. Eartha said that she actually visited with him a few days before that and that she could tell that he was gone in spirit, essentially. In 1956, Eartha published her first autobiography, Thursday's Child. And in 1957, Shinbone Alley began showing. She played Mehitable, the love interest. I don't know that that's how you pronounce it, but that is what YouTube told me, so that's what I'm going with. And if y'all thought that the plot of Cats the Musical was creepy, this musical is about a cockroach and a cat falling in love. So Eartha was the cat. Anyways, it was kind of a flop. I did not see any pictures of the roach costume, but this isn't super cat-like, but I think people were just not going for the cockroach cat romance. I don't know. That's my best guess. Where do they come up with these things? What happened in that person's brain to make them think of that? In 1957, Thursday's Child, the album, is released, and Just an Old-Fashioned Girl is one of her most famous songs from this album. So in 1957, Eartha began dating Bob Dix, and he was the son of Robert Dix, who was a famous actor, but he didn't really have any money himself. He had also just gotten divorced and didn't want anything serious, but Eartha fell in love with him, and she did want something serious down the line, and that's what ended up ending their relationship, but they did remain friends. And while they were dating, he also introduced her to a friend of his named Bill McDonald, who will come back into the story in a minute. But after that, sometime in 1957, 1958, the timeline is definitely very blurry here, Eartha went on a date with Charles Revson. He was the founder of Revlon, and he was actually married at the time, although they refer to his wife as estranged, which I'm guessing means separated. He also had a quiz show called The $64,000 Question, which ended up having a huge scandal. Anyways, he took her out to a very fancy dinner and asked her to call him. She said that after that she visited him in his office one time and they just talked for hours, and the next day he gifted her with a gold bracelet to say thank you for spending time with him. According to Eartha, the relationship was definitely not in public, but he was getting her lots of gifts. Essentially, she was his mistress, although his wife was already asking for a divorce. At one point, he had said that he wanted to buy her a mansion in Connecticut so that he could go and see her as much as he wanted and she could just live there. And she said that she saw it going to possibly marriage and children, but that is not how it ended up. March 5th of 1958, Mark of the Hawk is released, and Eartha played the character Renee. She did apparently have trouble getting diverse roles though, because people all really wanted her to play essentially herself or her persona, which, I mean, that is amazing because, you know, people really love you and your persona specifically, but if you're an actor, you know, you want to try out and play a bunch of different parts, so it was frustrating for her. April 10th, 1958, St. Louis Blues, the movie is released, and I'm saying St. Louis because y'all roasted me last time for saying St. Louis. And yes, I said St. Louis after y'all all roasted me for saying St. Louis last time. But in my defense, the two memorable times that I have heard that city's name spoken was 1, the movie Meet Me in St. Louis, and 2, Chuck Berry's Sweet Little 16, which he also says St. Louis in. So I'm not from Missouri, please stop roasting me, guys. Anyways, she played Go-Go Germain, and Nat King Cole was her love interest in the movie. Eartha said that they had a sexless love affair, which I am taking to mean that their characters were in love, so therefore they kind of fell in love a little bit while they were filming. I don't know. I feel like that is inevitably going to happen sometimes. So, her and Nat King Cole had a sexless love affair, aka, in my mind, they were in love because their characters were in love, but nothing really happened. Anyways, afterwards, his wife apparently saw a thank you note that Eartha had written him after he had filled her dressing room with roses. Seems inappropriate if you're married. And of course, his wife's reaction was to address Eartha, not him. Or at least that we know of. I hope that she did address him behind the scenes. So she sent Eartha a letter that said, I don't know if you think of yourself as some kind of temptress or siren, but the film is over and Go-Go is gone. Let's leave it that way. Well, Eartha decided to write back, just a quick little note, and it said, I feel sorry for one whose love of her husband is trustless. Oof. Also around 1958, 1959, again, timeline is blurry because she was essentially his mistress, but things go south with Charles Revson. She said he was having trouble with the $64,000 question, and he was told that he needed to put her in the background. Basically, they knew that the scandal was about to break, that they were giving contestants the answers ahead of time and basically rigging it, which they ended up having a lot of legal issues with, because that's fraud. And apparently his wife threatened to reveal that he had a brown-skinned mistress, and he thought that it would be bad for business and that stockholders would pull out. However, she also apparently had Bob Dix and Bill McDonald over at this time. As we know, Bob Dix is her ex. Apparently they were just visiting the city, but Bob was sharing a bed with Eartha, and he said nothing ever happened, and so did she. Nothing happened. But what did happen, though, according to Bob, was that one night they got home from a night out, and she said she was hot, unzipped her dress, and just took it off. Bob said that he left at that point, and then her and Bill got together, although she claims that nothing happened with Bill at that point. Apparently, Charles was told about this, though, by somebody who saw them out together. I'm guessing they didn't know about the sleeping together rumors, but he broke up with her over it. He did end up naming a lipstick Fire and Ice in her honor, though. November 26, 1958, Anna Lou Costa, the movie is released. Eartha was the lead role, and her love interest was Sammy Davis Jr., which has got to be awkward. They were still friends, though. In 1959, Jolly's Progress begins showing on Broadway, and she played the lead role of Jolly. Also in 1959, Eartha started dating Bill McDonald. A little suspicious. He was in school at the time to become a real estate agent, and he had also been in the Korean War and was injured in an explosion. In September of 1959, The Fabulous Eartha, the album, is released, and in 1960, Eartha got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Once again, though, like a lot of stars, she felt that the person who was famous was really a separate entity from who she was in her personal life. She said, I don't think I've ever thought of it as being me. I can go into being Eartha Kitt once I have the makeup, wigs, and eyelashes. A character in fairyland. So in May of 1960, Eartha married Bill McDonald, and she was heavily criticized for marrying a white man. She said, "People would say, 'Why didn't you marry a black man?' And I would reply, 'Because the white girls had them.'" In fact, she actually did mention in an interview that at one point she was hooking up with Harry Belafonte, and he told her at one point, "I don't want you to take this seriously. No black woman can do anything for me." So yeah, I'm not sure 1960s public that we need to be criticizing Eartha here. I feel like maybe there are other people who need criticism more. November 26th of 1961, Eartha gave birth to her daughter, Kit McDonald. Kit said, "To some extent, I think my arrival completed her because it gave her a family that she never had." She also said that Kit brought her something she always lacked, serenity, and basically that she wanted Kit to have everything that she did not have growing up. Kit obviously has Black, Cherokee, and white ancestry, and apparently Eartha would joke that you either break every rule or fill every quota depending on where you are. And another cute little thing that Kit said was that she often introduced us to people saying, "I'm Eartha and she's Kit," as if I completed her. In 1962, Bad But Beautiful, the album, is released. And she also released The Romantic Eartha that year. In July of 1963, though, Eartha and Bill McDonald decided to separate. This was apparently for multiple reasons. Of course, Eartha had a busy schedule, and if that is true for any celebrity, it is definitely true for Eartha. She did so much work. But as we know, it's never just busy schedules, and it was not in this case. He also had some addiction issues involving substances that originally he was prescribed after the war. She also said, "My husband is a successful man, but just not worldly enough for me." And later she was clear that he was constantly putting her down. By March 27th of 1964, Eartha and Bill are officially divorced. Side note, do we ever think that that style of hat will come back? Because I am a little bit worried if it does. She looks great in it. Would I look great in it? No, not a chance. But I'm predicting right now that I feel like that's going to come back at some point and I'm going to be in trouble. Anyways, her reason for divorce was put down as mental cruelty, and she said that he apparently invented letters from foreign countries accusing her of having affairs with other men. She also called him a thief later on because she said he got some good properties out of me, I'm assuming in the settlement. But she did win child support for Kit. At the time, there was rumors going around that she was dating Sir Frank Packer, who apparently was an Australian newspaper and television tycoon. And she told the tabloids that he had proposed to her and she was considering it, but she wasn't sure. And I'm guessing she said no. This is one of the pictures from the newspaper. Now, her daughter said that they moved to England after the divorce, but I'm not sure that it was actually in 1964. I think I know when it was, though, and we'll get to that. May 5th of 1965, the movie Synanon is released with Eartha. She played Betty. And also in 1965, her album Love for Sale is released, as well as an album of her songs in Spanish. And over the course of her life, she learned French, Spanish, and Turkish, and she said that she also was able to sing in 7 different languages. In 1965, she also founded the Kidsville Youth Foundation. It is a cultural arts program that includes dance, music, theater, and visual arts for kids, and it is completely free. And their website says that it was started as a response to the utter frustration, desolation, hopelessness, and anger after the 1965 Watts riots. And I bet you can guess what the Watts riots were about, even if you didn't know about them previously. Give you a second. Yep, police brutality. So September 14th, 1967, the Batman series started its 3rd season, and Eartha played Catwoman in this season. She was not universally loved for this role because she was one of the first black women on television who was allowed to exude such sex appeal in the 1960s, but obviously she did amazing. And then January 18th, 1968, Eartha was invited to a luncheon at the White House. LBJ was president at the time, and this was in the midst of the Vietnam War. And it was 50 women total, specifically invited by the First Lady, Lady Bird, to discuss President Johnson's proposal to combat crime in the streets. And I don't think anyone, and especially not all the buttoned-up politicians in the room, knew what was coming. Lady Bird, who was the First Lady at the time, asked Eartha what she thought of the Vietnam War, and Eartha said, "Boys I know across the nation feel it doesn't pay to be a good guy. They figure with a record they don't have to go off to Vietnam. You send the best of this country off to be shot and maimed. They rebel in the streets. They will take pot and they will get high. They don't want to go to school because they will be snatched off from their mothers to be shot in Vietnam." That was not the right thing to say, evidently, because things went very downhill after that. But, like, don't ask if you don't want the answer. Don't invite somebody to a luncheon specifically to talk about issues if you just want them to be superficial and flatter you. Also, despite both Eartha and Lady Bird saying that Lady Bird never cried, the newspapers reported that she burst into tears and called it an emotional tirade on Eartha's part. And USA Today correctly pointed out that they were clearly trying to make this into the angry black woman stereotype and the innocent white woman stereotype and weaponize white tears against Eartha, which just wasn't that situation at all. And Lady Bird's response was, "Because there's a war on, and I pray that there will be a just and honest peace, that still doesn't give us a free ticket not to try to work for better things, such as against crime in the streets, better education, and better health for our people." Which I feel like Eartha was pretty clear on why what she was saying about the war related to the crime in the streets that they were trying to solve with this luncheon. But Eartha then pointed out that kids were angry because their parents are angry because there's a war going on that they don't understand, they can't get to you, and they can't get to the president, so they rebel in the streets. And Eartha did make an apology statement, which she really didn't need to, but she also said, "I have to say what's in my heart." She also pointed out that unlike the majority of the women in that room, she did not grow up wealthy, she did not grow up privileged, and she did not experience hardship through observation only, she actually lived it. And Lady Bird responded and said, "I'm sorry, I cannot understand the things that you do. I have not lived with the background that you have. I cannot speak as passionately or as well as you, but I think we have made advances in these things and we will do more." Eartha wasn't done though, because she decided that it clearly wasn't getting through. So she said, "The children of America are not rebelling for no reason. They are rebelling against something. There are so many things burning the people of this country, particularly mothers. We raise children and send them to war." And basically that if you're in jail, then you can't be drafted. So we're literally incentivizing people to go to jail and commit crimes. Why is crime going up? You're incentivizing it. There's your answer. And you can imagine what the press was saying about all this. They were calling her anti-American. They were saying that she was setting back the civil rights cause, which is entirely inaccurate because if you can't think of somebody as an equal when they disagree with you, you never saw them as an equal. But when she got back from Washington in the airport, a lot of reporters asked her about it, and obviously she'd already seen some of the articles, and she said, "There's nothing rude about telling the truth. All those very nice people kept saying very nice things about putting flowers in Harlem and making bigger streetlights to keep the city safe. I thought they were avoiding talking about the reasons we have problems with crime and problems with our children." I love this woman. She did have supporters though, but these statements ended up getting her blacklisted and losing pretty much all of her career in the US. Still, she did not ever make a huge apology and take everything back. She said, "I'm entitled to my opinion, particularly when it is asked of me." So after this whole Vietnam War luncheon debacle, she made it very clear that she was no longer going to keep her mouth shut just to keep her career and keep her spot in the limelight. But she did move to the UK after this because she wasn't going to get business in the US and she knew it. And I think that this is the period that Kit was referring to, her daughter, when she said, "We lived in Knightsbridge and later Fulham. I went to school in London and spent many a year in England. My mother regarded England as a second home." And she also said that those years were not easy financially or emotionally and that she lost a lot of friends. And right after all of this, the Secret Service had the CIA put together an investigation on Eartha. They called it a dossier of secondhand gossip. So essentially the CIA was doing what I am doing here on a social media app. That sounds right. That sounds like it's in perfect order. One thing that they were apparently looking for was any ties she might have to foreign governments that might be trying to sow discord in America, but she had none. And so at that point, they decided to just be completely out of line in every sense of the word. But this was all in secret at the minute, CIA, so we're gonna go back to the story at hand and we will bring back up the CIA investigation later. But just know, it's going on behind the scenes. So in 1968, Eartha released 2 storytelling albums for children. One was Folktales of the Tribes of Africa, and the other was Black Pioneers in American History. In 1970, she released the album Sentimental Eartha, and she also played Mrs. Greystew in Henry James the High Bid, the musical. December 26th of 1971, the movie Up the Chastity Belt is released. This was a British film. I don't think the US would release anything like that at this time. And she played the character Scheherazade. 1972, Bunny begins showing in London, and she played the lead of Bunny. And in 1974, Eartha performed in South Africa. People really did not like this. They felt like she was showing support for the apartheid by doing this. However, she sold autographs while she was there and spent all of that money to build 2 schools for Black children specifically. And I'm not positive, but I'm guessing her contract stayed the same in South Africa. Her contract in the US required shows to be integrated. So if her contract in South Africa was the same, she was definitely ensuring that they saw her stance. But in 1974, Eartha ended up moving back to the US. And January 3rd, 1975, the New York Times published an article titled, CIA in 68 gave Secret Service a report containing gossip about Eartha Kitt after White House incident. So yeah, it's coming out. So we all find out that the CIA was compiling a report on Eartha Kitt, and they were just completely rude in this. There's no other way to describe it. These are actual words that they used to describe her. Nasty disposition, spoiled child, very crude, vile tongue, sadistic nympho. I don't know if I can say that word on TikTok. Y'all know what I'm trying to say. They also were trying to vilify her by saying that she was bragging about not having a very large percentage of Black ancestry and that she did not associate with other Black persons, which clearly wasn't true. Then they said that she supported MLK and signed an advertisement, just signed an advertisement, that some people that they thought might be communist also signed. So everybody who wants equality must have everything else in common. Perfect. That is sarcasm. Obviously, they were being idiots. Obviously, Eartha let us know that that's all bullshit, as if we didn't already know that. And she said this quote, "Scores of Hollywood, television, and music personalities, both American and foreign-born, have been far more critical of America's foreign and domestic policies than I have. The difference, of course, is that I am not Barbara Hauer or Jane Fonda or Candice Bergen. I am a Black woman. I have always known that racism was widespread in America, but it took the aftermath of the 1968 incident to prove to me just how deeply racial prejudice is rooted in the American national character. Because I am Black, I had to be taught a lesson and put back into my place as a singing, dancing, mindless automaton who saw no evil, did no evil, and most important, publicly spoke no evil. I don't regret anything that I've said or done. I only have pity and sympathy for those who tucked their moral tails in between their legs and cuddled up to the Johnson and Nixon administration's immoral and unjust policies." And that took most of this video, and I don't care because that was a fantastic quote. And I feel that that really put the incident to bed just once and for all. There was really nothing more to be said after she said that. And the next time we see Eartha is Christmas Day of 1975, when Friday Foster the movie is released. In 1976, Eartha publishes her second autobiography, Alone with Me, and she did say that she had issues with all of her autobiographies because the publishers really wanted it to be sensational, but she didn't want to be overtly sexual or just say crazy stuff for the sake of saying it, and they did not like that. January of 1978, Timbuktu the musical starts showing. This was hugely famous, and it went on for a few years, and she was actually nominated for a Tony for her performance in this. January 30th of 1978, Eartha was invited to the White House by President Carter, and supposedly when she arrived, he said, "Welcome home, Eartha." And in 1979, she was in the movie Butterflies and Heat. In 1984, her album I Love Men is released, and the hit from this album was one of her songs called Where Is My Man, and it was a disco song. Even though she was on trend at the time, she said that she is not a joiner, but if I happen to fit in for a moment or two, or 3 or 4, I'm very grateful. And Where's My Man was super popular in the gay community, and she was also super popular in the gay community because she was a big ally and she donated to a lot of HIV/AIDS organizations. In March of 1987, The Serpent Warriors is released, and she played the Snake Priestess. And in 1989, her album I'm Still Here came out. She also published her third autobiography that year, which was also titled I'm Still Here. And we also got Eartha Kitt in concert. She was really lighting up the world in 1989. She was also in Eric the Viking that year, as well as Dragonard the movie and Master of Dragonard Hill. In 1990, she was in the horror film Living Doll. And in 1991, she released her Thinking Jazz album. October 11th of 1991, Ernest Scared Stupid, the movie is released, and she played Old Lady Hackmore, which obviously she was getting older, but she's only 64 at this point, okay? And you can see she's not that old, they just put gray hair on her. June 28th, 1992, Boomerang the movie is released, which is an Eddie Murphy movie, and she played Lady Eloise. October 29th, 1993, she was in Fatal Instinct as a judge. She was starting to take smaller roles as she got older, as you can probably tell. 1994, she released her Back in Business album, and The Jungle Book also did a radio version that year, and she played the Python's voice. In 1996, Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill began showing. This was a musical based on Billie Holiday, who Eartha really admired, and she got to play the lead role, which was obviously Billie Holiday, which must be amazing to get to play your role model. July 10th, 1996, Harriet the Spy, the movie, was released. Hello, Michelle Trachtenberg. So weird. Anyways, Eartha plays Agatha K. Plummer. And then in 1997, Eartha went to speak at Benedict College in South Carolina. She had a scholarship fund there for dance students, but she hadn't been to the state in about 20 years, and obviously she grew up there as a child, and I don't think she went back much after that. According to her daughter, a student asked her about her childhood, and she said she didn't know much because she couldn't find her birth certificate. Well, then some students from Benedict College started helping out and trying to find the birth certificate, and they did. But after that, they had to get a lawyer and get a petition, and it took quite a while. I mean, the justice system moves slow sometimes. In the meantime, in 1997, she was in the movie Ill-Gotten Gains. This is not from Ill-Gotten Gains. This is just a picture of her with Fran Drescher. I love him. She also played the Wicked Witch of the West in 1998 in their off-Broadway tour for Wizard of Oz, not Wicked, sorry. So in 1998, Eartha finally got access to her own birth certificate. She was 71 years old by that point, and they only gave her 15 minutes to view it. Her daughter said she cried of happiness when she first saw it, but that quickly changed when she realized that they had blacked out the name of her birth father. Her daughter said, "They were still protecting the name of the father even though he was clearly dead. My mother assumed it was their dirty little secret." However, supposedly they did give some potential names, including Daniel Sturkey, which one of the biographers who wrote a book on her, that was the one that he claimed was a doctor. Some sources also said that she was given a key to North, the town that she grew up in. But I will say, both of those sources are South Carolina entities, and both of them say that she was given her birth certificate, which her daughter did not say, and her daughter also never mentioned getting a key to the city. I'm not saying that they're 100% lying, I'm just saying there's definitely two stories going on here. September 29th, 1998, The Jungle Book, Mowgli's Story is released, and this time she did not voice the python, she voiced the panther. In 2000, The Wild Party began showing and she played Dolores, and she also played the fairy godmother in Cinderella that year. And then December 8th, 2000, we get a piece of American history, The Emperor's New Groove. What a classic. And guess who voices Yzma? I could not believe it, Eartha. Eartha is the voice of Yzma. I was shocked and delighted. May 1st, 2001, Eartha published a book called Rejuvenate, It's Never Too Late. It was a health and wellness book. And April 11th, 2003, another piece of American history, Holes, the movie, is released. And here she is, Madame Zeroni. She's Zero's great-great-grandmother. I mean, I didn't know who Eartha Kitt was when I was a child, but I did know who Madame Zeroni was, and now I'm connecting the dots. In 2003, the musical 9 began showing, and she played Lillian LaFleur. In 2005, she was in the movie Preaching to the Choir as Miss Nettie, and she was also in Kronk's New Groove as Yzma. In 2006, she was in Mimi LeDuc on Off-Broadway. But in late 2006, Eartha found out that she had colon cancer. She actually went into the doctor originally for hand pain, but they found that she was bleeding internally after some tests. And obviously after that, they had to figure out why that was, and they discovered that she had stage 3 colorectal cancer. And her daughter Kit said, "We were stunned, as if we had been under a spell that she was invincible. She believed that everything happens for a reason." At first, Eartha did have surgery to remove her colon in early 2007, and they got rid of the cancer areas, but she did have to do chemotherapy after that. And obviously chemo is very tough, and after one round, she knew that she did not want to go through that, so she stopped. June 1st, 2007, she was in the movie And Then Came Love. She also won a Daytime Emmy for The Emperor's New School. 2007, she was still performing, and she was 80 years old, just in case you wanted to feel incredibly lazy today. She said, "I may be 80, but I'm still burning, and I want to be this hot at 80 too." November 4th of 2007, she did an interview with the Washington Post. She said that she loves teasing and flirtation, and that men don't know how to treat a woman anymore. So, all the high-value men out there, Eartha's onto your bullshit. She knows that you're lying, as does everyone else. She also said that she felt Britney Spears and Paris Hilton were setting a bad example, and that there's no subtlety anymore. In another interview around that time, she said, "We don't have much of the teasing factor anymore because of feminism. God, it drives me nuts. Men don't flirt with us anymore. They don't tease us because it's called harassment. I used to love it when I walked down the street and construction workers would whistle." Have to say I disagree on that one. I feel like, for me, the teasing is not fun. For me, it's feeling scary, dehumanizing. And like, if you're going to push little boundaries, maybe you might also push big boundaries if you don't see me as an equal to you. You know? Still, she was in her 80s at this point. I can't say that I am entirely surprised that her values don't perfectly align with the modern age. June 20th of 2008, she won another Daytime Emmy for Emperor's New School. But in November of 2008, she discovered that the cancer had come back. November 26, 2008, Eartha went in for surgery again to remove the cancerous areas. They did not finish the surgery though, because the surgeons stopped when they saw the cancer had spread throughout her body. And instead, Eartha went home and did hospice care. On Christmas Day of 2008, Eartha passed away at age 81. Her daughter said, "She may have come into this world belonging to nothing and no one, but that is not how she left it." I did write in my notes here that I was crying while writing that quote. If y'all ever wondered if I get emotionally invested, yes, I bring myself through the full range of emotions every single week. It's a labor of love. May 18th, 2009, after her death, we get a Wonder Pets episode that she was in. She played the cool cat. And her last role, January 10th, 2010, was on The Simpsons as herself. And I know it seems kind of silly that the Wonder Pets and The Simpsons were her last two performances that we ever saw, but I honestly think it just shows that she, one, kept doing what she loved until the day that she passed, and two, that she never took herself too seriously, even though she was incredibly famous. The sources will be in the next video, but I just want to say real quick, obviously she has autobiographies that she has made if you want to read those. Her daughter also has a blog and shop called simplyeartha.com if you want to shop any merchandise or just hear her daughter's thoughts. And thank y'all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment any additions you might have or any thoughts or opinions. I'd love to hear them, as well as any series suggestions or new video suggestions in general. And if you want to see more of me and more of my series, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you next week with another one.